morning, everyone. So, today's newspaper, 10th January 2025. Modi calls for documenting history of Indian diaspora, addressing Pravasi Bharatiya Divas event in Bhubaneswar. Prime Minister lauds journey of persons of Indian origin and speaks about their remarkable achievements. He also highlights country's global role. Lauding the journey of persons of Indian origin of different countries, different eras to various countries, their remarkable achievements and countries' contributions to the societies. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Thursday called for documenting the history of Indian diaspora. Addressing the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, he said, the history of Indian diaspora across the globe, their journeys to various countries, and their remarkable stories of success form a unique part of India's heritage. There are many interesting and inspiring stories which deserve to be told, seen, and documented. They represent our shared legacies and cultural heritage. Mr. Modi said in a world in turmoil due to wars across the globe, the future lay in Buddha, the symbol of peace rather than in war. Symbol of peace. Right here in Odisha is the place named Dholi, which is a great symbol of peace. Emperor Ashoka had chosen the path of peace here, while the world was expanding empires through the power of the sword. This is the strength of our heritage, with the inspiration of which India can say to the world today that future lies in Buddha, not in war. The pace at which 21st century India is advancing and scale of its development efforts are unprecedented. In just a decade, the country has lifted 25 crore people out of poverty. During the same period, India has risen from being the world's 10th largest economy to the 5th largest. It won't be long before India secure its position as the third largest economy. Underlining the country's global role due to its achievements and prospects, Prime Minister said today's India is not only firm, asserts its own point but also strongly amplifies the voice of Global South. Same-sex marriage, Supreme Court rejects review of judgment. The five-judge bench of the Supreme Court, headed by Justice B.R. Gavai, rejected petition seeking a review on October 23 judgment, which refused to legalize same-sex marriage. We have carefully gone through the judgments delivered by Justices R. Ravindra Bhatt, Hima Kohli, and as well as the concurring opinion expressed by one of us, constituting the majority view. We do not find any error apparent on the face of the record. The other judges were B.V. Nagaratna and Dipankar Datta. India bloc picks up over Congress for Delhi polls. So second page we have no articles. Third, Umar Sharjil's speeches created fear. Police to High Court. Delhi police oppose their bail pleas in Northeast Delhi violence case. They made references to CAA, NRC, Triple Talaq, Kashmir. SPP Amit Prasad. Speeches by Umar Khalid, Sharjil Imam and others created a sense of fear after the common reference to the Citizenship Amendment Act and NRC, National Register of Citizens, Babri Mosque, Triple Talaq in Kashmir, and the police argued before the Delhi High Court on Thursday. Mr. Khalid, Mr. Imam, and others were booked under the UAPA and the IPC for allegedly being the masterminds of the violence which erupted during the protest against the CAA and NRC. While challenging the trial court orders refusing the bail, Mr. Khalid and others cited their long incarceration and parity with others co-accused. Next, High Court questions maintainability of plea against AAP poll promise. The Delhi High Court questioned the maintainability of the plea against Aam Aadmi's recent poll promise of paying a stipend of 2100 to women in the capital under the Mukhyamantri Mahila Samman Yojana if the party returns to power. How it is maintainable as an election petition, Justice Jyoti Singh said, advised the petitioner to file the public interest litigation instead. The petitioner Vijay Kumar stated that AAP was luring voters with a false promise, as the Delhi government had already denied having such a scheme. Shaping agriculture and agribusiness. AAP chief writes to Election Commission to raid Parvez Singh's house for violating election code. Kejriwal claims his BJP opponent from New Delhi constituency was distributing 1100 rupees to women, demands suspension of district election officer. Aam Aadmi all measures in place for Mahakumbh Mela Minister with only 4 days left for the Mahakumbh Mela. Uttar Pradesh Minister for Tourism and Culture Javeer Singh reviewed at the preparations of Mahakumbh city in Prayagraj. Sub-inspector recruitment exam would be cancelled in haste, Rajasthan government tells High Court. Supreme Court grants interim relief to Telugu actor in scribe assault case. Telugu actor Mohan Babu in alleged assault of a journalist. The sub-inspector recruitment of 2021, mired in the allegations of paper leak and irregularities, will not be cancelled in haste. Haryana ready to implement 3 new criminal laws by February 28, says DGP Kapoor. Haryana is likely to become the first among states and the second after the Union Territory of Chandigarh to implement the 3 criminal laws in entirety by February 28, according to DGP Satrajit Kapoor. He said once 5G technology as well as all pervasive, it would be a force multiplier as the new laws mandated digital evidence through compulsory videography of crime scene and recovery procedure. The Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, the Bharatiya Sakshya Sanhita, and the Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita, which replaced the Indian Penal Code 1860, Indian Evidence Act 1872, and Code of Criminal Procedure 1898, came into effect on July 1, 2024 after the laws were passed in Parliament 23. The laws require upgrading infrastructure, forensic capabilities, and states have been given the 5 years to implement all the verticals. The 3 laws overhaul all the pillars of the criminal justice system: police, medical, forensics, and judiciary. Mr. Kapoor told The Hindu that the new laws define a timeline for courts to dispose of trial proceedings, and it might be challenging as the courts would have to deal with the existing cases registered under the old laws and the fresh cases in a time bound manner. He said the courts should not have the option to not accept charge sheets electronically. People who are not convinced will also have no option but to work for the success of the laws. No logistical issues are there. Mindset is half the problem. Once people are convinced and work in one direction, success will be achieved. It may take 2 or 4 years. 2 to 4 years. Once the inertia is broken, the success rate will be exponential. The Union Ministry of Home Affairs has set the timeline for March 31 for Haryana, but we expect to implement the laws by February 28, Mr. Kapoor said. Legendary singer P. Jayachandran passes away. Playback singer P. Jayachandran, known for his expressive singing, whose magical voice capabilities uh, captivated music lovers for over 6 decades, passed away at a private hospital in Thrissur on Thursday. Delhi Memorial in the works. HP Cabinet okays renaming of the State Institute after late PM. Even as Supreme Court surrounding the selection of a memorial site in the country's capital for former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh continues, the Congress government in Himachal Pradesh gave not to rename an institute in his name, acknowledging Dr. Singh's significant contributions for development of the hill state. The state cabinet in its meeting held in Shimla under the chairmanship of Chief Minister Sukhwinder Singh Sukhu gave approval to rename Himachal Pradesh Institute of Public Administration as Dr. Manmohan Singh Himachal Pradesh Institute of Public Administration. The cabinet acknowledged his significant contributions to the nation and to Himachal Pradesh development, asserting that Dr. Singh's tenure as Prime Minister and Union Finance Minister was transformative. Businessman remanded in 14-day judicial custody. Not relevant. Modi Shah cheating Jats by not extending quota, says Kejriwal. Aam Aadmi Party chief Arvind Kejriwal alleged BJP has been cheating the Jat community in Delhi by not adding to the central government other backward classes list, despite multiple promises. Curbs on petrol, diesel, and vehicles back on as Delhi air quality worsens. As the air quality deteriorated in Delhi NCR, Central implemented the Stage 3 measures of the Graded Response Action Plan on Thursday and banned construction and demolition activities. Flying of BS3 petrol and BS4 diesel cars shifted classes for students up to grade 5 and hybrid mode. Overall, the 24-hour average air quality index was 357 at 4 p.m. on Thursday, up to 297 a day earlier, according to Central Pollution Board daily bulletin. The Commission for Air Quality Management and adjoining areas also ordered staggered timings for public offices and municipal bodies in Delhi. Bihar cabinet likely to be expanded with 4 BJP ministers. The Hindu's book on Parthasarthi Perumal Temple in Chennai released. Parents Walyar sister death case. Tirupati stampede. CM Naidu suspends 2 officials and orders judicial probe. Next is Spotlight. Darkness descends on Bihar with all the praise of his body of work in a decade-long eventful career in drawing. The murder of 33-year-old Bijapur journalist Mukesh Chandrakar has also left questions of future journalists and journalism in Chhattisgarh. I'm reading Darkness Descends on Bastar and Bihar. Metro Plus. Splash with ink. The Raga Fellowship Foundation is presenting the Silver Lines to celebrate the Hindu musical instrument, featuring Abhik Mukherjee, Arnab Chakrabarti, and Rafuddin Sabri on tabla. Adhere Damage control. Adherence to existing regulations on limit can limit the impact of earthquakes. This week's an early morning earthquake in Tibet of magnitude 7.1 originating at a depth of 10 kilometers has reportedly claimed at least 100 lives and the damaged buildings and the houses. The tremors from the quake were felt in Nepal as well as parts of Bihar and even New Delhi, thousands of kilometers away. The main earthquake was followed by at least two aftershocks. If the epicenter had been located closer to India, the damage could have been manifold. Earthquakes in the Himalayas evoke a special kind of dread in the country. Memories of deadly quakes in Nepal in April and May of 2015 that killed at least 9,000, caused incalculable damage, still bubble up. The tectonic plates are the gigantic shards into which Earth is broken up. Layered on them are the continents and the seas. These plates are constantly in motion, colliding with, diverging with, or sliding past one another. The Indian plate collided with the Eurasian plate, and the crust tilted upwards, creating the Himalayas. The fractured zones along which they interact create the fault lines where earthquakes occur. By studying these faults and the patterns, memories of the two deadly earthquakes in Nepal in April and May of 2015 that killed at least 9,000, caused incalculable damages still bubble up. The tectonic plates are the gigantic shards into which Earth is broken up. The layered on them are the continents and the seas. These plates are constantly in motion, colliding with, diverging with, or sliding past one another. The Indian plate collided with the Eurasian plate, and the crust tilted upwards, creating the Himalayas. The fractured zones along which they interact create the fault lines where earthquakes occur. The fractured zones along which they interact create the fault lines along which the earthquakes occur. By studying these faults and the patterns of past earthquakes, seismologists can estimate how much latent energy at these fault lines, which can run thousands of miles, has been released and how much of it resides in them. Scientists have a long warned of massive overdue earthquake in the Garhwal Kumaon range because of what is known about the pattern of quakes in the region. The records of the last 300 years suggest that those have those that have occurred have not released all the pent-up energy, and that is why there is a broad consensus among experts that an 8 magnitude trembler is overdue. Unfortunately, predicting the day and time is outside the ambit of current science. Thus, the best we can hope for is insulation against the projected damage. It is in the context that infrastructure development in the Himalayan region must be viewed. While several of these projects are intended to smooth the movement of people and goods, but recurrent landslides and glacial lake outbursts that wash away dams, hydropower projects, and roads serve as a constant reminder of the inherent fragility of the region. Every form of infrastructure in the region, power plant or dam, must take into account the uh, im- imminence of a major earthquake and the associated cost of factored into planning. Adhering to already existing building codes, not only in the Himalayas but in the surrounding Indo-Gangetic plains, can go a long way in limiting inevitable damage. Winter contest. Assembly elections to Delhi have an oversized importance. Assembly elections on February 5 is said to be a bipolar contest between Aam Aadmi Party and Bharatiya Janata Party. Congress, once the most popular party of the national capital, is suggesting to regain at least part of its popular prominence. Delhi is not full-fledged state and its unique and convoluted governance designs often set the center and the state government on a collision course. Still, there is a national spotlight on Delhi politics, which the AAP and BJP have dominated since 2012. Since then, the voters in Delhi have swung overwhelmingly in favor of the AAP in assembly elections. BJP is pitching a double-engine government which will put an end to the tussle between the two powers that control Delhi. The election is likely to bring up the issues concerning the integrity of the election process itself. The AAP has submitted the election commission that the names of the bona fide voters are being removed from the electoral rolls. When announcing the elections, the Chief Election Commissioner sought to allay these fears, saying deletion of the names was not possible without adhering to strict protocols. Next, we need accessibility rules that are based on principles. The Supreme Court in Rajiv Rastogi versus Union of India held Rule 15 of the Right to Persons of Disability rules violative of the Right to Persons of Disability Act 2016. The court reasoned that rule was drafted in a discretionary tone where the corresponding provisions in the Act imposed a mandatory obligation for the government. This was significant as Rule 15 was a statutory provision under which the accessibility guidelines of the respective departments and ministries were notified. Key examples include Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs guidelines for creating barrier-free environment, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways Bus Body Code, and other accessibility standards. The court observed that these guidelines allow discretion to the ministries and departments, which is antithetical to the mandatory language of the Act. Moreover, striking down Rule 15 also meant accessibility guidelines notified under the rule lost their statutory authority. As a result, the court gave the government 3 months to develop minimum mandatory accessibility requirements to govern all the sectors. The judgment is a stark reminder of how accessibility guidelines have been created in silos without the identification of normative principles that will ensure universality and intersectionality to those guidelines. Court deliberated in detail on difference between accessibility and reasonable accommodation. Accessibility and reasonable accommodation both originate within the principles of substantive equality of the Constitution. Accessibility is now accepted as the right woven throughout the United Nations Convention of Right to Persons on the rights of persons with disabilities. Conversely, reasonable accommodation is a facilitator of substantive equality where specific challenges are dealt in specific contexts. Therefore, both concepts should be understood as an interdependent and complementary to each other, where accessibility builds the edifice through standardized accessibility standards from the outset, while reasonable accommodation ensures tailored solutions for those individuals who might still face inaccessibility in specific contexts. Rules have to be understandable. The RBWD Act defines barriers in the broadest form possible. the deadline for releasing the new accessibility guidelines subject to extension. Therefore, there is necessity for diverse sectors beyond social services to deliberate upon the minimum rules of accessibility. This isn't just warranted by the legislative mandate, but also market incentive to tap into a large population base by providing accessible products and services. Section 152 of the BNS should not have become a proxy for sedition. The Rajasthan High Court in Tejinder Pal Singh vs. State of Rajasthan cautioned against using the Section 152 of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita as a tool to stifle legitimate dissent. In 2022, before the BNS was enacted, the Supreme Court has suspended pending criminal trials and court proceedings under Section 124A and of the Indian Penal Code until the government reconsidered the law. This was followed by a verbal proclamation by the Union Home Minister that sedition would be revealed as an offence. Section 152 of the BNS criminalizes any act exciting secession, armed rebellion, and subversive activities. It also criminalizes acts encouraging the feelings of separation or endangering the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India. While the BNS does not formally use the term sedition, the Rajasthan High Court's recent decision hints that spectre of sedition still looms large on the BNS. First, the Section 152 of the BNS criminalizes acts endangering the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India. However, what constitutes such endangerment under Section 152 has not been defined in the statute. This renders the provision vague and amenable to the expanding interpretation by enforcement authorities. Accordingly, a speech criticizing a prominent historical or political figure or sympathizing with a controversial public figure may be construed as endangering the unity and integrity of India for initiating legal action against a person. In the current socio-political environment that appears increasingly fragmented, a stringent penal provision without inbuilt checks for abuse may be used to stifle dissent and criticism. Second, the term knowingly in Section 152 substantially lowers the threshold for commission of an offense, especially in the context of social media. Even if a person does not have the malicious intent to incite activities or feelings prohibited under Section 152, they can still be considered liable for the offense if they share post knowing it will reach a larger audience and may provoke such activities or feelings. This would be sufficient to arrest a person and prosecute them for commission of the offence under Section 152, which is cognizable and non-bailable. The lack of statutory requirement to prima facie establish a causal linkage between the speech and its actual consequence before the depriving the accused of the personal liberty renders 152 amenable to abuse much like its predecessor and has the potential to instill a chilling effect on the free speech. The potential for abuse of the sedition-like provision is clearly borne out by the data of the National Crime Records Bureau regarding Section 124 of the IPC. Out of 548 persons arrested between 2015 and 2020 for sedition, only 12 people were convicted in 7 cases. More importantly, this was situation when Section 124 IPC was relatively narrower and more specific in comparison to Section 152 of the BNS. Unfortunately, the NCRB data and the benefit of hindsight regarding abuse of Section 124A seems to have no bearing in the designing of the contours of Section 152 of the BNS. First, Section 152 criminalizes acts endangering the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India. Section 152 criminalizes acts endangering the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India. The way forward in the past, judiciary has consistently adopted a consequentialist interpretation to strike a careful balance between national interest and freedom of expression. The Supreme Court has given weight to actual consequences or impact of freedom of speech in determining the offence rather than considering the speech on its own. For instance, in Balwant Singh versus State of Punjab, Supreme Court drew a line of demarcation between casual sloganeering and its repercussions on consequences, requiring a direct causal nexus between the act and its impact to amount to an offense of sedition. Further, in Javed Ahmad Hajam versus State of Maharashtra, the court said the effects of the word must be judged from the standards of reasonable, strong minded, firm, courageous men and not those of weak, vacillating minds. Moreover, in Kedarnath Singh versus State of Bihar, the court had differentiated disloyalty towards the government was from strongly worded criticism of the government and its policies, given the lack of inbuilt safeguards in Section 152 to prevent its abuse. These interpretations should guide the enforcement authorities in applying the provision. Moreover, the Supreme Court should, when it gets the earliest opportunity, craft a set of guidelines for enforcement authorities, demarcating the boundaries for the terms used under Section 152 BNS, and it did with respect to arrest Dr. D in DK Basu's versus State of West Bengal. This will ensure that the provision does not become a proxy for the offense of sedition. It is important to provide liberal space to thoughts, beliefs, and expressions, and to subject them all to unimpeded criticism, especially in the age of social media. We need to fall back on the concept of marketplace of ideas as envisioned by the Chief Justice Holmes in Abrams versus United States, because the best test of truth will always be the potential of an idea to get itself accepted in a democratic and diverse society. Is India open to the idea of dual citizenship? At an event in December, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said there are a lot of challenges in providing dual citizenship in Indians settled abroad. He pointed out that overseas citizenship of India drive is a step towards meeting the demand and added that the debate on dual citizenship is still alive. Is India open to the idea of dual citizenship? Amitabh Mattu and Vivek Karju discusses. Do you think dual citizenship for diasporic Indians could become a reality? First, let me distinguish between NRIs living abroad and the people of Indian origin. NRIs or non-resident citizens are Indian nationals who hold Indian passports. They have all the rights and that accrue to Indian nationals. The only thing they cannot exercise abroad is the right to vote, though I believe arrangements were made at some stage for NRIs to register themselves in the missions so they could vote in their place of entitlement. PIR persons of Indian origin are not Indian nationals quite clearly, and therefore they do not have political rights. At one stage the government had given expanded economic facilities to PIOs, and later what was called a PIO card was converted to an Overseas Citizen of India card. Now, I never understood the reason for this change in designation, as the OCI card does not confer on any person of Indian origin any additional facilities or any rights which the PIO card did not already possess. Citizenship essentially Citizenship essentially has political attributes. If you are a citizen, you have the full right to participate in the political process of the country. A non-citizen does not have that right. So the word citizen is extremely confusing, and in my opinion it should be avoided as it creates a misleading impression. Minister Jaishankar's remarks have opened up an issue that has unresolved contours. Professor Matu, what are your thoughts about granting dual citizenship rights to people of Indian origin living abroad? Let me understand the context one. At an event in December, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar said there are lots of challenges to providing dual citizenship to Indians settled abroad. He pointed out that the Overseas Citizen of India drive is a step towards meeting the demand, and added that the debate on dual citizenship is still alive. ठीक है. So Avitam Mathu, I think Mr. Jaishankar must have made an off-the-cuff remark. It cannot be a serious question to be debated at this point in India that certain people or class of people who are no longer Indian citizens or who either gave up Indian citizenship or never were Indian citizens will be given additional citizenship of India. If you look back at the Constitution of India, Part 2 deals with the section of citizenship. Article 5 of the Constitution defines who is citizen of India either by birth or by parentage or by acquiring it after having remained a resident in India. There is also a distinction being between being a domicile and being a citizen. You may be domiciled in India and yet not be a citizen. This was determined by Supreme Court in the D.P. Joshi versus State of Madhya Bharat in 1955. The only major amendment to the Citizenship Act came in 2019 with the Citizenship Amendment Act. Then there was fast track process for minorities from certain neighborhood countries to be allowed to take Indian citizenship. I don't think it can really be a serious substantive question to allow people to have citizenship of both India and another country, because that would confer political rights. In other words, citizens of US, UK, or Australia, for example, would not only have political loyalty to those countries, but also the right to vote in India. That, frankly, for me, is an extremely dangerous idea. As an Indian citizen, I would not be willing to give political rights to anyone with divided loyalties. Because, after all, dual citizenship means that you have divided loyalties. We are not ready to have dual citizenship in this country after just 75 years. I am not xenophobic. I am not a person who has grown up with an idea of global citizenship in a larger sense. But in terms of which political dispensation which govern India, I am not willing to share that right with anyone who has but 100% political loyalty to India. Personally, I had the option of acquiring Australian citizenship, and the only reason I did not take it was that it would mean relinquishing Indian citizenship. The incoming Trump presidency has several Indian origin people as well as first generation Indian immigrants who will hold public office. Do you think that for certain communities and certain kinds of workers who are employable globally, the idea of citizenship requires some degree of flexibility? No, you cannot have divided loyalties. You either are a citizen of India, which is in full rights, political rights, economic rights, etc., or you are not. You mentioned that in the US there are people of Indian origin who have or who will be holding the office. I think persons of Indian origin have been elected to the House of Representatives this time. Let us not forget that they are American citizens. The Indian systems and law demand that the moment you acquire the nationality of another country, you relinquish India's nationality, which means that you do not have political rights anymore. I believe it is democratic right of every Indian to choose the citizenship of another country and relinquish the Indian citizenship. But they cannot say, I will acquire the citizenship of another country, participate in its political process, and still hold on to political rights in India. Now, I know that some other countries allow that, but I must confess that I have very orthodox views on India. The international system is a system of states. I completely endorse Mr. Karju's remark. We cannot, for the sake of populism or to attract foreign investment, create what the Marxists call a comprador class, a class of people who will act as foreign agents in India. You give them the right to vote and to elect members of parliament and legislative assemblies. That is a sure way of recolonizing India. But if you open this Pandora's box by allowing even a single citizen of another country to have dual citizenship in India, it would be deeply dangerous and subversive. There are situations where people who have decided to make India their home have relinquished earlier citizenship and become citizens of India. Mera Alfasa, known as the mother whose work inspired many and who founded the Aurobindo Ashram in Pondicherry, became an Indian citizen despite earlier campaigning from dual citizenship. Similarly, Mother Teresa became an Indian citizen and economist John Drawsey I believe, relinquished his Belgian citizenship and became an Indian citizen. In the US, which might seem more flexible, the fact is you cannot become a president unless you are born in the territory of the US. Even Elon Musk, despite all championing of Donald Trump, can never aspire to be a president because he was born in South Africa. So some laws are much more rigid. Is the issue being propped by populism? I hope not, because I have a great regard for the external affairs minister. So I'm sure he's not doing it for populist reasons. The diaspora has a great role to play, but not as dual citizens. You have the diaspora playing a role in cementing bilateral relations with the US. The huge a successful Indian diaspora in the US often acts as a rallying point for leaders' visits there, and similarly in other countries. The first Indian diaspora of indentured labor that went into the Caribbean may not have been successful in material terms as this new wave of diaspora, but as I said, they can cement bilateral ties and help attract investment from abroad. As in the case of Microsoft, Satya Nadella had promised investment in artificial intelligence that is all good for a nation, all for the good of the nation. However, the question really is whether the diaspora could become a Frankenstein monster. While its role may appear benign and a source of greater good, you may suddenly empower it to the point where it decides who is going to be a next leader. This is where I think there has to be a Lakshman Rekha. You need to maintain a clear line between the useful role played by the diaspora and its crossing the boundaries. I am not willing to let any Satya Nadella or Vivek Ramaswamy or any person of Indian origin who may just acquire Indian citizenship or for instrumental reasons while retaining their American or other citizenship decide my political future. I am an Indian citizen and I vote for my future along with other Indian citizens who do not have any other loyalty to any other country. Journalists in Kashmir have long navigated the hostile, facing threat, surveillance, and legal repercussions. Covering Kashmir in the 1990s at the peak of militancy required one set of survival kits to navigate, wearing warring parties, intimidation, and threats to control narratives. Decoding India's growth slowdown. The official definition of India's projected growth and projected GDP growth rate may still be an underestimation of the extent of global slowdown. The revenue mobilization strategy needs to be reworked to enhance taxation on wealth and profits in order to enhance capex and welfare spending. The first advanced estimates of the India's GDP in 2024-25 released by the National Statistics Office this week shows a decline in the real GDP growth rate to 6.4% from 8.2% registered in 2023-24. This is lower than the 6.5 to 7% range projected by the Economic Survey in July 24. The growth rate in nominal GDP, which is the sum of real GDP growth rate, and the overall inflation rate is estimated at 9.7% in 24-25 is significantly lower than the 10.5 growth rate projected in the last union budget. The official diminution in India's projected GDP growth rate may still be underestimation of the extent of the economic slowdown. Academics and institutional experts have consistently pointed out serious defects in the official GDP estimates, with the International Monetary Fund recommending an upgrade of the real sector statistics. An informational annex to the 23 IMF staff consultation report on India had inter alia noted that the compilation of constant GDP deviated from conceptual requirements of the national accounts, in part due to the use of wholesale price index as a deflator for many economic activities. The appropriate price to deflate GDP by time of activity is the producer price index, which is under development. Large revisions to historical series, the relatively short time span of the revised series, major discrepancies between GDP by activity and GDP by expenditure, and the lack of seasonally adjusted quarterly GDP series complicate analysis. Together, these weaknesses make it very challenging to monitor high frequency trends in India's economy through official statistics, particularly from the demand side. The estimation of real or constant price GDP requires the use of GDP deflator to estimate the values of GDP components in constant prices. The GDP deflator is being used in India's official estimate as a weighted average of wholesale and real price indices. The wholesale price index to 2011-12 series has shown high volatility over the past decade, leading to inexplicably large divergences between WPI and CPI inflation rates. This has led to serious implications for the accuracy of the GDP deflator and the real GDP estimates. For instance, the nominal GDP growth rate was estimated at 14.2% in 2022-23 and 9.6% in 23-24, which indicated a sharp decline in growth. However, the real GDP growth rate was estimated to have grown from 7.7% to 8.2%, indicating growth acceleration. This implied that GDP deflator was only 1.4% in 23-24, even as retail inflation was at 5.4%. Because the WPI inflation rate was estimated to have fallen from a high of 9.4 to a negative of minus zero point 0.7 in 23-24. In short, because of a high volatility in the WPI, the nominal GDP estimates showed a growth deceleration in 23-24, but the real GDP estimates reflect growth acceleration. Such anomalies and confounding data on macroeconomic fundamentals invariably lead to delusions and policy errors. Tabled a day ahead of the Union budget, last July economic survey has taken a comfort in 8.2% growth in real GDP and indicated a vigorous expansion by investment in the private sector. Yet, the chief economic advisor has asked whether the corporate sector responded positively to the tax cuts of September 2019 and complained about sluggish corporate investment in machinery and equipment and intellectual property products. He criticized the disproportionate allocation of gross fixed capital formation in the private sector to dwellings, other buildings, and structures as an unhealthy mix. Though such caution to the wind, the Union budget relied entirely on the revival of the private corporate capex cycle to announce the Prime Minister package for employment and skilling with an outlay of 2 trillion, aiming to benefit 41 million youth over a 5-year period. The employment links incentive or subsidy scheme and the internship program for 1 crore youth in 5 years was premised on the expectation of massive job creation, consequent on the acceleration of private corporate investment. The fiscal consolidation, whereby fiscal deficit was projected to decline from 5.6% of GDP in 23-24 to 4.9% in 24-25 and 4.5% in 25-26 was also announced, with the budgetary expectation of private sector taking a lead in the capital formation process. However, the latest GDP estimates have shown a significant decline in the growth of real gross fixed capital formation from 9% to 6.4%. A longer view of the India's growth trajectory over the past decade, even on the basis of exaggerated official national account estimates, show the irrationality of official expenditure. During the 10 years of United Progressive Alliance rule between 2004-5 2013, the average annual growth rate of real GDP was 6.8%, investment 10%, and private consumption 6%. Between the onset of present regime till the outbreak of the pandemic, that is between 2014-15 to 2019-20, real GDP grew at annual average rate of 6.8%, but real investment growth fell to 6.3%, while private consumption growth increased to 6.8%. Thus, economic growth under NDMA was not investment led, as was the case in UPA. Moreover, during the UPA period, real growth in private investment was over 10%, above the growth of public sector at around 9%. Under the NDA rule till the pandemic, public investment in real terms grew faster at a rate of 6.6% per year than private investment, which grew by 6.3%. Investment consumption and output has collapsed in 2021 owing to the lockdown induced recession. The recovery in 21-22 was indeed led by private investment, but the spikes in growth rates of investment consumption and output were on account of the base effect. It was simply a return to normalcy after the collapse in the preceding year. From 2022-23 to 24-25, real GDP and investment have grown at an annual average rate of 7.2% each, and private consumption are at 6%. Post pandemic, there has been 1 percentage point increase in the annual average growth rate of real investment and zero point 0.8 percentage point decline in the annual average growth rate of private consumption. Therefore, there is absolutely no indication of any structural break in the investment behavior of the private corporate sector so far under the 11 years of India rules. The deep corporate tax cuts in September of 2019 have failed to spur capital formation and real economic activity. Rather, it only held a short lived spurt in the corporate earnings and fueled a post pandemic revival of the equity market. In contrast, the advent of UPA regime has led to real investment and exports boom between 2004-5 till the financial crisis global recession of 2008-9, which was facilitated both by massive increase in industrial bank credit and significant foreign capital inflows. A similar private investment-led boom has reimagined elusive under the NDA regime. This testifies to the forgotten truth of the political economy that supposedly business-friendly governments can deliver much wealth and profits for their cronies but are incapable of bringing about economic wide structural changes and common prosperity. Fiscal strains, the more reliable supply side data on the economy reflects a more sober picture of economic recovery since the pandemic and the nature of the slowdown that has set in. Quarterly gross value added growth on a year basis has been downward sliced since 23-24. The agriculture sector continues to slow cyclical fluctuations. After showing double digit growth in the two quarters of 23-24, the growth rate of the manufacturing GVA has been on a downslide. Slowdown is visible not only in the mining, power, and construction sectors, but also in the services like retail trade, transportation and communication, finance, and real estate. The only sector where GVA is projected to grow at a higher pace in 2024-25 than the previous year is public administration, defense, and other services. This shows the crucial role of public spending in sustaining economic growth in the Indian economy. In this context, the monthly accounts of the union government further indicates that crucial revenue and expenditure targets set in the last union budget are likely to remain achieved, while the windfall of 2.1 trillion surplus transfer from the Reserve Bank of India has enabled union government to mobilize about over 78% of its non-tax revenue target for the 24-25 by November 24. Mobilizations of the center's net tax revenues between April to November 24 was only 56% of the budgetary target of 25.83 trillion. This has led to spending less than half of the 11.11 trillion budgeted as capex for 2024-25 till November 24. It is clear that economic slowdown has disrupted budgetary plans by slowing down tax revenue growth. Adhering to fiscal consolidation path would imply a squeeze on public spending, including capital expenditure, which in turn would further aggravate the slowdown. Jettisoning fiscal rectitude rectitude altogether is not feasible given the already elevated levels of public debt and interest payments. The only way out appears is to be reworking of the revenue mobilization strategy by enhancing taxation of wealth and profits in order to enhance capex and welfare spending. The inescapable nature, cultural infection, relevance of Nosferatu. To commemorate the return of Mahatma Gandhi from South Africa, New Delhi. Diaspora's contribution to the Viksit Bharat. The theme of this year's Pravasi Bharati Divas is Diaspora's contribution to the Viksit Bharat. Pravasi Bharatiya Samman. Stubborn water level affects coal mine rescue operation. 8 miners are trapped inside a rat hole mine since Monday morning in Assam. And today is Friday. Today is Friday. The unchanged level of murky water has affected the operations to rescue at least 8 miners trapped in a rat hole coal mine in the Dima Hasao district of Assam since Monday. Rescue workers from the multiple agencies retrieved the body of one miner identified as Ganga Bahadur Shrestha from Nepal on Wednesday. Deep divers from the Indian Navy and personnel from the Army, National Disaster Response Force, State Disaster Response Force, ONGC, Coal India Limited, and district administration were engaged in operations. Officials said the rescue worker could not locate any of the other bodies from dawn to dusk on Thursday. Dima Hasao District's Magistrate Simanta Kumar Das said 4 abandoned coal pits were found nearby. Trees have grown inside these mines that have filled with water. We have to assess these mines to be if these mines need to be dewatered too. The Kopili River, which partly forms the boundary between the Tima Hasao and West Jaintia hills of the Meghalaya, is also a few meters away. The river is connected to the reservoir. The Prime Minister emphasized on the Girmitias indentured laborers who were sent from pre-independent India to various countries including Fiji, Mauritius, Seychelles and Malaysia, Trinidad and Tobago. Why cannot comprehensive database of Girmitias be created? This could document all the document the villages and states they originated from, destinations they settled in, and the journeys that shaped their lives. It could it could also as to how they converted challenges into opportunities to bring their stories to a wider audience. Films and documentaries could be produced. There should be study and research on Girmitia's history. Chairs can be established in universities at regular intervals. World Girmitia conference can be organized. I will tell my team to explore possibilities on this aspect and the work to take this forward. The Prime Minister mentioned about a few families which migrated from Gujarat and settled in Oman. Their 250 years of journey is quite inspiring. Thousands of documents related to them have been digitized and exhibited. Besides, an oral history project has been done by document experiencing shared by senior most members of the country. Similar efforts should be made from Indian diaspora who have gone to different countries. Balls in government court on SC/ST creamy layer, says top court. Supreme Court Judge B.R. Gavai on Thursday said ball was in courts of the legislature and the government to take a call on whether creamy layer of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe beneficiaries of reservation in education and public service must be excluded from quota benefits. We have given our view that taking into consideration that past 75 years, such as persons who have already availed benefits and are in position to compete with others, should be excluded from reservation, but it is a call to be taken by the executive and the legislature. The court was hearing a writ petition filed by the Santosh Malviya seeking a direction to the state departments and public sector undertaking for immediate cessation of reservation benefits being extended to the creamy layers within the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. The judge heading benches, including Justice Augustine George Massey, was referring to a constitution bench judge of 2024 which had upheld states' power to make sub-classification within the scheduled caste. Justice Gavai, who was part of the seven-judge bench, in his separate opinion on August 1, 2024, had called the need to evolve a unique set of criteria to exclude the creamy layer among SCs and STs. State must evolve a policy for identifying the creamy layer even for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes so as to exclude them from the benefit of affirmative action. The criteria of exclusion for the creamy layer from SC/ST for the purpose of affirmative action could be different from the criteria as applicable to the other backward classes, the judge has observed. Justice Gavai's opinion has formed the basis for the push within the majority of the Constitution bench to introduce the creamy layer principle for SC/ST categories. Judgment in Archikar rape and murder case on January 18. Judgment in the rape and murder of an on-duty doctor on Arjikar Medical College in Kolkata in August last year will be delivered on January 18 by a court here. The Central Bureau of Investigation, which was handed over the probe by Calcutta High Court, has sought the death sentence of Sanjay Rai, who was charged with carrying the gruesome crime. The hearing in the trial concluded on Thursday, maintaining that other persons were also involved in the crime. The victim's parents said that they hope they will be arrested and tried before the court. UGC affidavit in Supreme Court refers to a letter to VCs to act against caste bias on campuses. Unauthorized procurement supply of railway e-tickets, a social crime, says top court. Unauthorized procurement or supply of railway e-tickets, a social crime, says top court. High Court grants bail to Gujarat journalist in GST case. It said that there is no maintained material on record to establish money laundering. Sixth generation aero engine can be developed by tying up with the foreign firm DRDO chief. The only way India can develop a sixth generation aero engine and other technologies required is by development with a foreign is by co-development with a foreign manufacturer. Samir V. Kamath, chairman of DRDO, said while noting that India currently invests in 5% of its defense budget for research and development, which needs to be increased to 15%. To realize the capabilities, he said the country will have to invest close to $4 billion to $5 billion, that is 40,000 crore to 50,000 crore. His remarks come against the backdrop of the huge delays in the development of the indigenous fighter jets. While China has made rapid progress in this area, if we look at what we need to do in terms of research technologies, the first priorities is aero engines. Today we have demonstrated a fourth generation aero engine for our fighter aircraft, but going ahead we will need a sixth generation aero engine where the thrust to weight ratios exceeds 10. Mr. Kamath said, speaking in the event 2 days ago. He detailed various technologies that need to be developed, such as single crystal blade powder metallurgy disc and ceramic metric composites for static parts to begin with. And if we have to do this and deliver an aero engine, the only way I can see is if we do a co-development with foreign original equipment manufacturer. Elaborating further, he said various facilities have to be set up, testing facilities for each subsystem, high altitude test facility, flying test bed, manufacturing facilities to make the disc, which would need investing in a forge press which can press 50,000 tons and so on. PM to open Z Mora Tunnel, key feature in year-round Kashmir-Ladakh corridor. The Z Mora Tunnel is set to become the first major milestone in the effort to build a strategic corridor between Kashmir uh, and Ladakh, which is open all through the year. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi slated to inaugurate it on January 13. The tunnel in the Ganderbal district is to keep keeping the tourist destination of Sonmarg open for visitors around the year. Earlier snowfall and avalanche would cut off the tourist spot every winter. This will be Mr. Modi's first visit to Kashmir since an elected government took over the reins in the Union Territory. A security assessment of the project was done on Thursday to set a foolproof security arrangements ahead of the PM's visit. Security access of the valley, especially in the Srinagar, has been stepped up and additional checkpoints set up on the main roads. Hoteliers are enthusiastic about the tunnel. It was much needed to have Sonmarg on the winter tourism map of Kashmir. There is need to open up new winter destinations given the growing footfall. It would be safe to drive to Sonmarg in winters now. The Z Mora Tunnel is set to become the first major milestone in the effort to build a strategic corridor between Kashmir and Ladakh, which is open all throughout the year. Prime Minister Narendra Modi said. The tunnel in Gandarbal district is keeping the tourist destination of Sonmarg open for visitors throughout the year. Delhi Assembly polls proved to be India's movement of reckoning. Congress says union budget must end tax terrorism and looting of the public. India releases a compilation of 10,000 human genomes from 83 population groups. The Genome India database will be available to researchers across the world. It will serve as a template for investigations into disease drug therapy. India has completed and made available a year-long compilation of 10,000 genomes representing 83 population groups, making up 2% of the country's 4,600 population groups. As a database, the collection will serve as a template for future investigation into diseases and drug therapy. The Genome India database, as it is known, will now be available to researchers across the world for investigation and is housed at the Indian Biological Data Centre in Faridabad, Haryana. The first analysis of the genome estimates around 27 million low frequency for relatively rare variants, with 7 million of them not found in similar reference. Justice B.N. Sri Krishna to chair panel for ID verification firm Equal. The former Supreme Court Judge B.N. Sri Krishna will chair the newly formed advisory board for the ID verification and data sharing platform Equal. The firm provides identity authentication services for large firms, boasting digital integration with service ID providers. The appointment comes as the government finalizes Digital Personal Data Protection Rules 25 to implement the DPDP Act 23. Justice Sri Krishna was the chair of the first committee formed by the Union Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology to formulate a data protection law. The committee's report submitted in 2018 was eventually not taken up. Justice Sri Krishna has also headed the Sixth Pay Commission, chaired the Financial Sector Legislative Reforms Commission, and also led the Expert Committee on Arbitration Law to propose reforms to the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. The Advisory Board for Equal will counsel the account aggregator One Money. Account aggregators are firms that will provide Indians with consolidated view of the financial data, a key digitization priority for the government. The commitment of the two firms enables secure, compliant, and consent-driven data sharing aligns closely with my work in safeguarding privacy and fostering trust in technology-based democratization of products and services. Record registrations for Pariksha Pe Charcha: 2.79 crore students. Pariksha Pe Charcha. CBI files new corruption case against Karthi Chidambaram. Against former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram's son and Congress MP Karthi Chidambaram for allegedly giving relief to alcoholic beverage company Diageo Scotland over a ban on the duty-free sale of its whiskey. Is as Meta shifts away from the professional fact checkers, Indian firms await clarity. Indian fact checking organizations are on a uh, tenterhooks as they await the consequences of Meta's decision to abandon its partnerships with the professional fact-checking organizations in favor of the community-led model. Starting with the US, the change has accompanied the partisan atmosphere that has enveloped fact-checking in the US, where the election of the Donald Trump as president has driven an ideological reorientation among big tech firms. Amitabh Kumar, founder of the Social and Media Matters, which has worked with social media platforms, said he was trying to keep an open mind on Meta's move, but he said there was concrete reasons that should that lead to the introduction of fact checking on social media platforms. Cambridge Analytica happened because of the Facebook. He said, recalling how firms' user data were used for behavioral campaigns. There was also scrutiny on the firm's role in shaping opinions leading up to Brexit, United Kingdom's decision to leave European Union. Fact checkers were brought into counter this. But Mr. Donald Trump's election and divisive rhetoric around fact-checking in the US, which drew criticism during COVID-19 pandemic as posts and accounts were being taken down or flagged at any time, when there wasn't yet total consensus among scientists on the disease's causes and origins or the risk around the vaccines, have led to resentment towards professional fact checking by social media platforms. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg said fact checking organizations have behaved in a partisan way. He added that the new community system would face fewer accusations of bias. As The Hindu had reported last May, the implementation of community notes on X have been impeded by the requirement that people across the ideological spectrum must agree on the inclusion of a fact check on the post. This requirement has led to political misinformation and particularly going unchecked frequently. The two senior fact checking executives contacted by the Hindu declined to comment on Meta's announcement implications for India, citing uncertainty on immediate consequences. Meta has not released any timeline for and with when such a change will be implemented in other countries. Government blames double counting for overestimating gold silver import bills. Glitches in import to migrate SEZ trade reporting to IceGate system have led to both system sharing mutually exclusive data to Commerce Ministry. More corrections may be in the offing or the latest changes first reflect first phase of reconciliation after effecting as an unprecedented 14.2 billion downward revision in the India's goods imports on the first 8 months. The center on Thursday said the erroneous figures were thrown up due to double counting of certain imports into the SEZs, and the official panel will be sprucing up data consistency, signaling that further data revisions could be in the offing. Commerce Ministry said the principal commodity level data uploaded recently by the Directorate General of Commercial Intelligence and Statistics incorporate the first phase of reconciliations made till date, pointing to the record 14.9 billion gold import tally. Novelis Inc. plans to raise $7.5 million via bond. IOC, BPCL and HPCL to get 35,000 crore in LPG subsidy. The center is likely to provide a subsidy of 35,000 crore to state-owned Indian Oil Corporation Limited, Bharat Petroleum Limited and Hindustan Petroleum Corporation Limited to make up the losses they incurred on selling the fuel this fiscal. The three fuel retailers have kept the price of domestic LPG unchanged to 803 per 14.32 kg cylinder since March 24 despite a rise in input raw material costs. This has led to under-recoveries on LPG sales and resulted in drastic fall in the earnings in April-September period. The total under-recovery of the LPG sales for the industry in the current fiscal year is estimated to be around 40,000 crore. Against this, government is likely to provide 35,000 crore in total spread over the two financial years, the two sources said. India's new central bank chief seeks to improve forecasts. Sanjay Malhotra, India's new central government governor, Sanjay Malhotra has initiated a review of the Reserve Bank of India's inflation and growth forecasting tools to minimize projection errors, four sources said. Mr. Malhotra, who took charge last month, is asking the RBI's internal teams to include new data sets, analysis, and projections in inflation and growth forecast. Sources aware of the RBI's thinking said none of those source wish to be identified as they are not allowed to speak with the media. The RBI did not immediately respond to Reuters' email seeking comment. The review comes amid increased scrutiny of the bank's growth and inflation estimates, which have been off the mark for much of the current fiscal year. with growth on track to be much weaker than expected and inflation higher. As the December policy meet, the RBI cut growth forecast sharply to 6.6% from 7.2% for 2024. The RBI cut growth forecast sharply to 6.6% from 7.2% for 2024-25, with retail inflation projections raised to 4.8% versus 4.5% earlier. This was after India's gross domestic product growth fell unexpectedly to 5.4% in July-September quarter, its slowest in 7 quarters, while inflation quickened against November. On Tuesday, the government forecast annually of 6.4% in the financial year, ending in March, the slowest in 4 years, and below the RBI projections of 6.6%, weighted by weaker investment and manufacturing. Two of the sources Reuters spoke to the RBI would look to increased datasets requiring to gauge trends in income and expenditure better. For this, it could include trends in small ticket digital payments as well as data from food delivery apps and online taxi aggregators, both sources said. A breakdown of different components of fuel usage could also be added to judge retail and industrial activity. Mr. Malhotra is data driven. As of now, he wants to curb forecast errors the RBI has been marking on inflation and growth. The RBI is seeking to widen data collected on India's informal economy, which is currently inconsistent and difficult to use, to make accurate forecasts. A second source aware of the discussions to improve inflation projections. The RBI will use machine learning tools to preempt price fluctuations in volatile items like food. The first source said we should be able to see the impact of changes made fairly soon in February policy projections itself. Wildlife rages out of control near Los Angeles, killing at least five. The biggest of the three blazes has consumed more than 5,000 acres in Pacific uh, Palisades, a picturesque neighborhood in the West Los Angeles. Officials say fierce fires were hindering firefighting efforts. California declares a state of emergency. At least five people were killed and several fast-growing wildfires raged out of control on Wednesday near Los Angeles, destroying hundreds of buildings, scorching hillsides, and prompting officials to order some 180,000 people to evacuate their homes. Fierce winds were hindering firefighting efforts and fueling the fires, which have expanded unimpeded since they began on Tuesday. The biggest blaze has consumed more than 5,000 acres in Pacific Palisades, a picturesque neighborhood in the West Los Angeles County between the beach town of Santa Monica and Malibu that is home to many film, television, and music stars. More than 1,000 structures have been destroyed, Los Angeles County Fire Chief Anthony Marone said at a press conference on Wednesday. Another fire, the Eaton fire, has grown to more than 2,000 acres as it has burned some 50 kilometers inland in Altadena near Pasadena. The LA County Sheriff has indicated that the total death count is still being determined. The Hearst fires in Silmar in San Fernando Valley, northwest of Los Angeles, has exceeded 500 acres. A high number of significant injuries has occurred as the flames spread. Residents began evacuating. The emergency responders were going door to door to press evacuation orders. President-elect Donald Trump, who takes office in 2 weeks, blamed Mr. Newsom's environmental policies for the disaster in a post on his Truth Social website. After 2 years of vacuum, Lebanon elects new leader. Lebanon's parliament voted on Thursday to elect Army Commander Joseph Aoun as the head of the state, filling more than 2 years of long presidential vacuum. The votes came weeks after the tenor ceasefire agreement halted a 14-month conflict between Israel and Lebanese militant group Hezbollah at a time when Lebanon leaders are seeking international assistance for reconstruction. Mr. Aoun was widely seen as preferred candidate of the US, Saudi Arabia, and whose assistance Lebanon will need as it seeks to rebuild. The session was legislature's 13th attempt to elect a successor to Michael Aoun, whose term ended in October. Hezbollah previously buckered another candidate, Suleiman Frangli, the leader of a small Christian party in North Lebanon with close ties to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. However, on Wednesday, Mr. Frangli announced he had withdrawn from the race. In the first round of voting, Mr. On received 71 of the 128 votes but fell short of two-third majority needed to win outright. In the second round, he received 99 votes. Mr. Joseph On Myanmar junta airstrike kills 40, injures 20, drawing widespread condemnation. A Myanmar junta airstrike killed at least 40 persons and injured 20 persons in the village in western Rakhine state, according to the reports from the Arakan army and local rescue workers on Thursday. The bombing occurred 1:20 p.m. on Thursday during fierce fighting between Arakan army and the military for control of Rakhine state. The attack ignited a fire that destroyed over 500 homes, leaving residents in shock as they navigated through charred ruins. Arakan Army spokesperson Khaning Thukha reported that initial estimates indicated 40 civilians were killed, 20 wounded. However, a local rescue worker stated that the death toll had risen to 41. The military's use of airstrikes against civilian communities has drawn widespread condemnation and amid escalating violence following the coup that ousted Aung San Suu Kyi in 2021, the UN has warned that over 3.5 million people have been displaced by the conflict, with projections indicating that nearly 20 million people may require aid in 2025. Militants abduct 16 mining laborers in northwestern Pakistan. Djokovic could run into Alcaraz in the last eight. Defending champion Jannik Sinner and 10-time Australian Open winner Novak Djokovic has landed the opposite sides of the draw for the season's first major, ruling out a replay of the last year's semi-final match. Sinners upset Djokovic in the semi-finals last year before coming back to beat Daniils Medvedev. Golden opportunity for players to impress, says Smriti. Indian skipper Smriti Mandhana feels that series against Ireland is a perfect platform for the younger players to stake claim for the selection in the ODI World Cup, which India is hosting later this year. Gavaskar backs Bumrah to succeed Rohit as Test captain. Max Equini returns to Australia squad for Sri Lanka tour. Cummins sore ankle a worry for Aussies ahead of Champions Trophy. Lancers bounce back to edge out team Gonasika. Mo Farah announced as ambassador of the Mumbai Marathon. Mo Farah, the legendary distance runner, has roped in the international event ambassador for the 20th edition of Tata Mumbai Marathon to be held on January 19. Viker named men's team skipper for the World Cup. The leadership role underlines his status as one of the best players in the country. Kho has been one of the part of the Prateek Viker's life since the age of 8. The game might have begun as a fun activity or a welcome distraction from academics during his school hours, but succeeding in it as the years passed has propelled the 32-year-old from Pune to become the captain of India's men's team for inaugural Kho World Cup. West Ham hires Potter as his new manager. Brigwanshi stars as Delhi Downs. Kerala takes on Karnataka in men's quarter-finals basketball championship. Back to the drawing board as questions about the road ahead looms large. It's been less than a week since India succumbed to a 6-wicket defeat at the Sydney Cricket Ground, which saw them relinquish their grip on the Border Gavaskar Trophy. The final test and the 1-3 scoreline was a disappointing outcome for the team, which had promised much to its surprise victory in the series opener in Perth. The biggest talking point from the series was subpar performances of the captain Rohit and Kohli. The most significant setback was Bumrah, the standout performance throughout the series, missing a test and a half. Jadeja's future too has become under focus after a mediocre scores at number 6. Jaiswal, one of the few top order batters to return from Australia with his reputation enhanced, and the young duo of Nitish Kumar Reddy and Washington could form the core group going forward along with Rahul Pant. Periodic screening required to avert sudden cardiac arrest in athletes. Let the medical reasons guide the decisions to perform hysterectomies. So it took me 1 hour 20 minutes to go through the Hindu newspaper once. Let's begin with the Economic Times newspaper. Restaurants up in arms against Swiggy, Zomato, 10-minute apps. Tax cuts, SOPs on Pharma Inc.'s budget wish list. Bison set up slap fresh sanctions on Russia. TCS quarter 3 profits up by 3.9% quarter on quarter, lax estimates. हम एक हमारे foe. Small borrowers binge on debt. About 5 million micro borrowers, nearly 6% of total base of November took loans from 4 or more lenders, illustrating the extent of their indebtedness that has triggered defaults and caused ballooning of bad loans in the lending industry, serving the most vulnerable customer segment. The number of borrowers taking loans from 3 or more lenders was 11 million, or 13% of the total microfinance borrower base of 85 million, showed the latest data collated by Credit Bureau (CIRF). At present, the microfinance sector is reeling under severe asset quality stress. The sectoral growth performing assets ratio rose to an 18-month high, 11.6 at the end of September. Further, the number of lenders per borrower was further the number of lenders per borrower was started rising since October 22, with impact of pandemic on the wane. PM calls on diaspora aid to gain from India's progress. Next is RBI accepts 76.8% of GSEC buyback bids. India to aid Taliban in settling refugees fleeing Pakistan assault. A slew of projects in health and education sector will help Kabul govern better. Niger case: Canadian court gives bail to all 4 Indian nationals. Karan Brar, Amandeep Brar, Kamalpreet facing murder charges. In a significant development, the Canadian court has granted bail to all 4 Indian nationals accused in the murder of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Nizar. The release, which can be a setback for the Canadian government, comes amid churn in Canadian politics. Critics claim that delays and lack of substantial evidence have undermined Canada's position on the matter. 4 Indian citizens, Karan Brar, Amandeep Singh, Kamalpreet Singh, and Karandeep Singh, are facing charges on the first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The trial has been transferred to British Columbia Supreme Court, with the next hearing set for February 11. In the May 2024 Royal Canadian uh, arrested the four men across different locations in Canada, but the prosecution faced criticism for delays in presenting evidence. India captured my heart, US envoy Garcetti, US ambassador. Eric Garcetti described his tenure in the country as the most extraordinary and said India captured his heart. During his interaction with media, uh, representative on sidelines of the program, he said the relationship with India holds endless possibilities. Garcetti, whose term as the US ambassador is ending soon, said his stint was most extraordinary job in his life. This was to be in the right place at the right time with the right relationship. Bihar Congress Chief defends Tejasvi. Bihar Congress Chief Akhilesh Prasad Singh Thursday defended RJD leader Tejasvi Yadav, whose reported comment on the India bloc was only for the 2024 Lok Sabha poll has kicked up a political storm. Raised mega dam project concerns with China ex Arunachal Pradesh CM to center. Former Chief Minister of Arunachal Pradesh, Nabam Tuki, on Thursday said centers would take up with China on the concern over the latest movement of the mega hydel project on the Yarlung Zangpo in Tibet region close to the border of the state. Government, which is fully aware of the China's move to construct a mega dam on Yarlung Zangpo, should take up with China our concerns and proposals should ensure that they are properly addressed. Tuki, who is the president of presidents, Congress committee, it is also important that central government take effective steps to ensure that India's critical interests, both territorial and water sharing, are not adversely affected by China's moves. Rakhigarhi Stadium confirms Harappan love for sports. Mahakam facilities. The UP Police has established 10 state-of-the-art digital lost found centers across the Mahakam area for safety and convenience of devotees. These centers are equipped with state-of-the-art facilities including waiting rooms and medical rooms to ensure comfort. A separate refreshment area has been arranged for women and children. Additionally, all centers have been fitted with 55-inch LED screens connected to the public address system which will display live updates regarding lost and found persons and items. Center's wildlife panel clears way for Ammo storage in East Ladakh. Caverns for storage of strategic equipment also approved by expert panel. Modi calls on diaspora to aid in gain from India's progress. There should be tax relief in budget. Consumption slump is widely admitted. We come ये काम का नहीं है. Spotify India loss narrows, revenue strikes a high note. Tax cuts stops on Pharma Inc.'s wish list. Hard selling AI by non-HR example. Salesforce shows productivity gains last month. San Francisco-based software biggie Salesforce brought home the chill of AI-induced job losses when it announced it wouldn't be hiring any software engineers in 25. Earlier, CEO Mark Benioff has said Salesforce needs 2,000 extra salesmen to peddle its customer relationship management software. Tech layoffs stabilized last year after brutal 23 when companies corrected for pandemic overhiring. But the numbers are still way too high. Current projections do not present a picture of net addition. As AI moves into more functional areas like Silicon Valley, Cent tech and finance industries are seeking productivity gains, where AI is making them available and downsizing in anticipation of requiring investments where they are not. Salesforce is ahead of the curve by virtue of its product portfolio and serves as a marker for AI's progress in agent-based customer roles across Fortune 500 companies. Its wide distribution model underscores its potential job displacement from the back to the front office. The company has shared criticalness about going public with the savings it is delivering to its enterprise customers, an issue most companies soft pedal. Work to live, don't live to work. L&T's chairman SN Subramaniam has gone up actually 20 hours work, 20 hours up on the venerable and Narayan Murthy. He has suggested employees should be working 90-hour work weeks. He recounted his encounter with someone who claimed that China can beat the US because people there work 90 hours a week while Americans work 50. He went to exhort L&T employees to get the office and start working by exclaiming, "What do you do sitting at home? How long can you stare at your wife? How long can your wife stare at your husband? The wife stare at your husband." Putting in more hours to work seems to be the latest stress sport in town. The subtext, having a life outside work, is for the sissies. This line of thinking smacks an autocratic mindset, a slippery slope for societies that aren't communist China, my way or the highway, is an invitation to have everyone's march to the beat of the drum, even if that leads to everyone off a cliff. India needs latitude to innovate, imagine, live. This is not just to diss workaholics. They have their usefulness in political science. Territorialism offers the principles in 16th century Europe that require inhabitants of a territory to the Holy Roman Empire to conform to the religion of the ruler or to immigrate. We thankfully live in 21st century where such territorialism is regressive, repressive. L&T pulled out that old rabbit of work as nation building out of its hat, explaining that CEO's remark reflected uh, this larger ambition. Nations that treat individuals as mere cogs for a national project are unhappy nations. After all, Arbit Mac, work sets you free, was the slogan written on the entrances of Nazi concentration camps. Welcome to Elon Dawn. How Trump's, with days left for his inauguration, Mr. Donald Trump's MAGA plan faces controversy. The appointment of Indian origin entrepreneur Siris Krishnan, a senior policy advisor for AI, polarized Trump supporter, especially after his ex-post advocated for removal of the country's caps on green cards to unlock skilled immigration. About 1.40 lakh employment-based green cards are issued annually, with no single country allowed more than 7%. This policy disproportionately affects large Indian diaspora in the US, who are the largest cohorts of H-1B visas. The demand for skilled labor in the US remains high, as shown by the 4.7 lakh H-1B e-registrations by the American employers for fiscal starting October 1, 24, far exceeding the annual cap of 85,000, including the 20,000 master cap for those who with advanced US qualifications. A lottery determines successful candidates. Those cap, though cap exemption H-1B visas are available for institutions like universities and government research organizations. The numbers are believed to be fewer. Krishnan opened a Pandora's box, and the argument shifted to claims that H-1 visas represent cheap labor that takes away American jobs. Elon Musk went on a warpath defending the need for skilled immigrant labor, but admitted the H-1 visa was broken and needed major reform. Trump voicing his opinion that he always liked the H-1B visas, adjacent ripples across his MAGA base. India emphasizes that skilled professional mobility is vital for India-US relations, benefiting both nations. It allows companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and Tesla to hire skilled talent, and Indian companies like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, and HCL to service their clients on site in the US. A National Foundation for American Policy Remove study revealed Tesla's significant rise in H-1B visa approvals in FY24 with 742 applications. Petitions for initial employment doubled in fiscal 23, totaling for 1025 for continuing employment visa extension. Small tech firms in the sector such as healthcare also rely on H-1B visa holders. Indian origin doctors are crucial in rural American hospitals, with India being the top source of immigrant physicians and surgeons. According to migration policy, Institute 987 lakh doctors in US, and 59,000 are Indian. 20 represented 22% of all immigrant doctors. Indians are major H-1B beneficiaries. In FY23, they accounted for 68,000 initial employment visas and 2.1 lakh of extensions, far outpacing China. During Trump's first term, his administration has targeted the H-1B visa plan, proposing policies to hike wages by 40% to 100% and restrict eligibility, particularly for client-side placement. A lawsuit by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Stanford University, and others court ruling striking down these rules for violating the Administrative Procedure Act by skipping public notice and comment requirements. In the final days, Trump 1.0 issued H-1B selection final rule on Jan 8, 21, prioritizing visa-based selection based on wages. However, September 21 court vacated the rule, citing the acting secretary of Department of Homeland Security appointment was not valid, which vitiated this rule by the DHS. The incoming Trump administration needs to look at three distinct scenarios. US qualified freshers. If the wage prioritization is done without due care, it would cut off the talent pipeline as new graduates post optical practical training would not be eligible for an H-1B visa. H-1B bogged down in the first green card queue. Krishna rightly pointed out the demerits of a country's cap for green cards. A quick fix would be advancing the dates in the visa bulletin to clear the backlogs of skilled, revamping the existing lottery mechanism. Next is telecos want DOT to take tries international call. Airtel adds revenue market share, closes gap with Jio. Deals dividend offset TCS muted Q3 show. Hike in refrigerant gas prices turn chemical coal stocks hot again. Quadrant Future Tech IPO gets over 186x bid. Ministry of Finance calcs retail inflation variations across state panel to ensure consistent trade data release. LA wildfires swatches 27,000 acres. Restaurants body arm up in against Swiggy, Zomato 10 minutes food delivery apps. So this was all in this part. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one.